Hey, friends. This is Martine Williams, and I am obsessed with all things mompreneur life and helping you to remix your priorities, your habits, your mindsets, and yes, even your relationships so that you can build a successful business without losing yourself in the process. I'm also obsessed with the color turquoise and lyrics of the 80s and 90s, but that's beside the point. Girlfriend, you don't have to hustle 24/7, 365 and continue to sacrifice your health, your relationships, and your sanity to be a successful mompreneur. As a small town girl living in a lonely world to a six-figure mompreneur, I am here to teach you how. There is a better way, and this podcast is your one-stop shop for all of the how-tos, the encouragement, the life hacks, the success tips, and of course, a little side of tough love. This is the Mompreneur Life Remixed podcast. So let's do this. We are in for a real treat with today's episode. And we're actually going to do this as a two-part episode series because this conversation was so great and so full of amazing nuggets that we went almost an hour and 10 minutes. And so I know if you're like me, your attention span can only handle so much. So we're going to do a two-part series, but it's the first of my Turquoise Talk episodes where I'm going to be honoring men, husbands, fathers this month, since it's Father's Day month, to really give you the behind the scenes of what it's like to support a mompreneur. Maybe these are going to be great episodes for you to grab your partner and let them listen. Whoever your support person is, we specifically talk about the support of a husband in this episode, but the information would apply to whoever your biggest support system is, or that you're trying to get on board with your business. So today's guest is Scott Monroe. He's a dear friend of Shaw and I's, but a little bit about him. I feel like everybody knows him, but I know many of you do not. He is a musician, communicator, ordained minister, and for 18 plus years, he worked alongside his entrepreneur wife, another dear friend of mine, Cindy Monroe, in their business, 31 Gifts. At 31, he led the creative marketing and communications team until 2011, when he became the chief brand officer, where he served to guide and cultivate the faith-based and purpose-driven culture of the 31 family. He did an amazing job. Scott also enjoys playing music, boating, golf, snowboarding. I've been snowboarding with him, hiking, and spending quality time with great people. He loves partnering with Cindy in work, hobbies, ministry, and life. He and Cindy have two grown kids, Alex, who is a graduate of the Ohio State University, and Evan, who is studying fashion design in New York City. Y'all, you're getting ready to have just the most amazing blessing by listening to the highs, the lows, and just some really good conversation around how we can help our husbands to be on board with this crazy idea we have of starting a business, or maybe you've been in business for a while, and what are some things that he can do to support you. So it's an episode for both of you. And so I highly encourage you to, whether you listen to it together or individually, get your spouse or whoever your support person is and get them to listen to the episode. So grab your pen and paper and let's do this. Well, welcome back, friends, to the Mompreneur Life Remix podcast. This is episode number 42, and I'm really excited about this series that I'm going to be doing the whole month of June to honor the fathers and the men and the husbands that I have seen over the years come alongside the mompreneur in their life and support them in their business. So since June is Father's Day month, I really wanted to dedicate this time to not just honoring these men, but giving you the opportunity to hear from them and how they've been supportive. What are the obstacles they had, and what are the successes that they had, and how did they do life, and support the mompreneur. It's the number one question I get as a coach of mompreneurs is this support system that is so important. I know I wouldn't be where I am at today if it wasn't for the support of my husband, but it hasn't always been easy. And so I'm going to be honoring these men this month, and I'm so excited to have our first Turquoise Talk guest, a first male Turquoise Talk guest, Mr. Scott Monroe. Scott, I'm so excited to have you on here, and thank you for being willing to share not just the successes, but also, the obstacles that go along with, supporting just really in marriage in general, but also someone who is building a business. So thank you so much for being here.
Oh my gosh. Thank you, Martine. I appreciate the privilege of being on here and sharing. This is exciting.
It is very exciting. So as I was saying to you before we even started recording, like I feel like everybody should know who Scott Monroe is, or everyone does know who Scott Monroe is, but I realize that not everybody does, even though I'm like, who doesn't know Scott Monroe? But for the listeners that don't, just tell us a little bit about you and your family and just a little bit so they can kind of get to know Scott.
Sure. Well, I'm a Southern boy. I was raised in Tennessee. When I was in college playing as a musician, I met this girl through a gig I was playing at a church. She played in the church orchestra, and I sat beside her, and I was smitten and asked her out, not knowing that she was quite a bit younger than I was. She carried herself very mature. But over a series of events over the next few months, we kept seeing each other out in places. And finally, it wasn't taboo for us to go out. She was still in high school. I was in college, but we worked our way through that. And that was Cindy Monroe, or Cindy Jewel at the time. And I was head over heels with her. We stayed out talking the first date we ever had. We stayed out at a restaurant till 1:00. They practically closed the place down on us. And we just talking and had intelligent conversation, and we shared a lot in common. Also, we're very different. And we can talk about that maybe a little bit later and how that's a good thing. But we hit it off. 3 years later, right after she graduated high school, we got married. Her first year of college, I guess. We got married, had our first kid. About 5 years later, Alex, our little girl, Alexandra. At the time, I had been in ministry, was on church staff leading worship. And then I went on the road teaching people about worship and doing retreats and little Christian coffee houses. I was a saxophone player by trade, worship leader kind of as a second thing I did. And so I would play Christian coffee houses and I would go to lead worship in churches. And I did that for about 6 years. And Alex was a little girl. And, I later came back off the road. I worked in churches. And then in 2003, Cindy had the idea. She had been kind of a mompreneur through another direct selling company that she did very well in while she was in college. It was just kind of a hobby, but she excelled in it amazingly. And we loved the direct selling industry. We loved the independence and the flexibility and the extra income and really the amount of reward for the effort you put in, if you put yourself in, that you can get from it. And so she came to me and said, I think I want to start a direct selling company. We had been seeing some products at a big wholesale market, and she started 31. And that was our thing and has been our thing for almost 20 years now.
And you've been married how long?
I've been married 29 years.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll be 29 years this October. She's put up with me that long and endured my horrible jokes and bad habits and everything else. So.
Oh my goodness. Well, y'all are just, I've told you this, Anthony, so many times, just there's so many people that look at your relationship, from a professional standpoint, but also just how you both support one another is just amazing. Again, the reason why I wanted to invite you to come onto the podcast. So
sure.
when Cindy, kind of said, I think I want to start this company or I want to build my own direct sell company, like what was your initial reaction? Were you like excited on board or were you kind of like, I don't know about this?
People have asked this question a lot. And I wish I could say that I did one of those, let's win one for the Gipper speeches, inspirational talks, and sat her down and told her all the reasons why she should. The good news is I did not sit her down and talk about all the reasons why she should. To be honest with you, at that point in life, I said I was a musician. I was in the ministry. We didn't have any money or anything to lose. I didn't know how we were going to do it because we didn't have any money to invest in it, but we had nothing to lose. I think, honestly, 20 years in, I think it's a lot easier to say yes to things when you have less to lose.
True.
But I think the burden of things or finances or responsibilities with kids or whatever, the more of those things you pile on, the harder it is to say yes to some things. So I didn't have a hard time saying yes. I didn't know where it would go.
Right.
Neither one of us did. It was just a sure. I did believe in her. Like I said, I'd seen her success, not just in direct selling, but when she got into the corporate world, she really was driven and was, I was starting to see signs of her moving up a corporate ladder and people in authority over her really taking her under her wing. She's a smart lady and really, a great problem solver and a great creative thinker. And I'm like, sure. I mean, she can do this. Again, we didn't know what that meant. I think had I seen where it was going, I might have said, we can't do this.
Yeah. It's kind of a good thing that God doesn't show us the whole plan, right? Because it would stop us, a lot of us.
There's a preacher, I think maybe Joseph Garlington from Philadelphia. Some people may know him. He used to do this funny talk about how, there's 1 million Jews in the desert. And he says, see that cloud way up front, or the Ark of the Covenant, the Ark of the Covenant way up there. I want all 1 million of you to keep your eye on that tiny little thing and follow it through the desert. And he talk about how, imagine 1 million people going, I gotta follow that. I can't even see that,
Right.
But he talked about how God really, I think this is what I got out of it anyway. It's been many years since I heard this, but what I learned from that was God will point you in a direction and will give you a vision, but he doesn't very often paint the whole vision for you. He just says, look, point that way, right? Point your shoulders that way and start walking. And one of the things that Cindy always says is success. Her definition of success is taking one step forward at a time. As long as you're stepping forward, and as long as you've got some direction from a vision God gives you, then you're being successful. You're having little success. Every step is a little bit of a success along the way. So yeah, we just kind of took a direction and went. And I seriously am glad he didn't show us how big it would get, because I would have chickened out.
Well, I love that you said, you just sat down and talked with her and listened, and it wasn't like you were immediately like, no, this could never happen. Or these are all the reasons why you shouldn't, or we shouldn't do this. You just sat down and had a conversation. And I think that sometimes is missing from both sides. When someone has an idea or they want to start a business and, they don't let their spouse in on that conversation. It's like, this is what I'm going to do, or this is what I think we should do. And I just love that. That's what you said you did. You actually just sat down with her.
Yeah. And I don't pat me on the back, because I am far worse at this than I am good. But Martine, we get so wrapped up in the impact of that thing on us personally that I don't think we even have ears to hear what the other person is saying sometimes. I do that. I do that almost daily. I mean, I catch myself doing it all the time. And I think, in any relationship, I'm sure Cindy and I both do it. We all do it, is when somebody says, hey, I think we should, and it's this big audacious idea, or it's just a little, or if it's just, hey, why don't we go camping next weekend? Immediately we as human beings process what that means to us.
Right.
And
how's it going to impact us? Yeah.
Yeah. And then we really don't stop to think, what are they really wanting out of this? What is this? What's driving this? What makes them? I think that's one of the hardest interpersonal things to manage in a relationship is when somebody else says something, what's their motivation? What does this mean to them? Because we immediately take on our own concerns and our own desires and our own apprehensions about whatever it is. So it's hard. And I don't, like I say, I think back then it was a little bit of godly ignorance and naivete for me to just say, yeah, okay. I mean, and I'm glad I did. I mean, it was the right thing to do. Right. But God, and I think that's one of those times where God gave us grace for the moment, and gave me grace for the moment to be able to say, yeah, okay, let's try it. And the other thing too, I can't discount this. She had stood beside me 6 years on the road, bringing home sometimes $150 after a weekend at a church.
Right.
She never put that guilt on me, but I think, when you show support for one another, you really start to carry one another's burdens, and you really start to support each other. And she had already done it for me and supported me in my dream and my vision for going out and sharing, the gift of worship music with people. So that probably prepped me for it too.
True. Love that. Love that. So we know there's always a mess before the success. And for me, that's what draws me to people, is kind of hearing the mess. Like, we know there is one. So what were some of the obstacles, that you had maybe personally or as a couple? What was the mess before the success for y'all with building the company and you supporting her as a mompreneur?
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, we had our share of messes. You start a company from nothing and grow it. You know, I think the other day we were talking about it. I think that we were in 8 different facilities in 8 years. There were some messes as far as how we operated the business because we really didn't know. I mean, Cindy had some operations classes in college, and she was she majored in kind of an entrepreneurship, or she majored in business, and entrepreneurship was her favorite class, I should say. And so, you know, she knew some stuff, but man, I mean, running a business when you've never run one, because neither of us had ever run a single business. Right. I mean, I still haven't run a business 20 years later. and so I think the biggest obstacle is just not knowing what we're doing. But that's where her great ability to react fast and problem solve really came in, because she is not willing to, and you know, as a husband, sometimes I hate this. She's not willing to let today go down without a problem solved. So that means if there's something between us, we may be up till 2 a.m. discussing it in bed, you know, when I really just want to sleep and move on. And
I'm like that. I'm like that.
But I love that. Now I'm grateful for it. And now I actually look for those opportunities to, you know, if there's something going on, talk it out. But I think in business, there was a guy that wrote a book, I think Jason Jennings, I think it was called, It's Not the Big That Eat the Small, It's the Fast That Eat the Slow. And he talks about company leaders who are good at making quick decisions to resolve problems and moving on. It's not about how powerful and how rich and how much money you can throw at it. It's not the big that eat the small, but it's the fast that eat the slow. And he kind of has an analogy, I think, about fish or something. But at any rate, I think we were able to do that and react fast. But because of that, it was always something different, always something new, and, you know, trash on the sidewalks that we couldn't clean up, and personally delivering packages on Christmas Eve all over Southeast Tennessee and Northwest Georgia. And, you know, those were challenges. And then for us personally, once the business really took off, we had moved the business to Ohio from Tennessee. And for us personally, what started to happen a little bit was we were kind of working together when things were small. But as the business really started to grow and we started to get more people around the table who were very smart and very good business people, I was becoming more and more kind of underqualified for some of the big business things. Now, from a marketing and brand and creative and all that stuff, I was fine with that. But numbers and strategy and planning and all that stuff. And what started to happen for us really is, you know, we would be in meetings together and they were having very businessy discussions. I was always kind of the heart and people side. And, you know, in my ignorance, always thought you can just do it. You can just do what's right for people.
Yeah.
Just do what's right for people.
Right.
And in some ways that's true, but you have to keep things in balance, because if you always only do what's right for people, you always only give, eventually there's nothing to give anymore. And right. You know, it's got to stay in balance. And not that we never argued, but there was just this tension that kept building. So at some point we just decided, look, you know what, my lane is more over here and I don't bring a lot to the table in those meetings. There's a lot of meetings I still would go to, but we just decided to kind of find our lanes. And we discovered this with boating. Like, when we love to boat, and when we boat, I need her to be the first mate, and she's a great first mate. Early on though, you know, I'm giving her instructions on how to tie ropes, and she's giving me instructions on which way to move the boat. And there's this back and forth because we're not carrying our load. And there's an important dynamic that happens on a boat. The captain needs to be the captain. The first mate needs to be the first mate. And you need to draw lines and do that. And we learned to do that. But I think that was, you know, for us personally, some of the mess before the success and learning to navigate it was us learning our lanes and learning, you know what, I bring a ton of value to the business, but not over here. I think she may say differently. She wanted me to be able to bring value on the business side,
right?
You know, but at some point we discovered that just wasn't my sweet spot, and we divvied up, and we still work together on all the business, but we didn't work all day, every day in meetings together. And it was better because we're so different. Right. We're both so different. We're both, and we, you know, we don't argue our differences. We actually try to balance our differences and say, you know, you may be feeling that way for a very valid reason, so let me come meet you over there. I love to quote Barbara Bush when W asked him how she and his dad did it so well for so many years, and you've probably heard this. I know a lot of people have heard it. Barbara Bush said, we met each other 3/4 of the way there.
Yeah.
Instead of meeting in the middle,
right.
Right. And I think you have to do that. You have to be willing not to just come to the line in the center and have a face off.
Right.
You got to be willing to go over into the other person's world and help feel what they're feeling. And that's where you get, a more balanced relationship, I think.
I mean, that's just marriage right there. Business or not, just being able, like you said, to cross the line and come into their world, and even with parenting, and same thing with your children too, kind of coming into their world. And I'm sure there was some, changes that had to happen also at home, right? As the business started to grow, how the dynamic of what you did at home and what she did at home. And that might be something that the listeners, they're kind of going through that right now. They're trying to shuffle the priorities and make sure that they're staying in their right lanes, but also being willing to help. I know when I first started, my business, Shaw had to step up and help with the kids a little more because I had a team call, or I had a party to go to or whatever. And he was always very, very supportive. And then there came a time where I needed to delegate, some things out as well. So can you talk a little bit to that for the listeners?
Yeah, I think our story is very similar to yours. With both of us engaged in the business full time, we had to delegate and bring some people to help. We had a wonderful lady that kind of nannied our kids and helped with house stuff, and a couple of other support people that would help just manage the complicated things outside of work because we were working so much. I remember Cindy and she shared this with the consultants all the time. Like, one of the greatest gifts you can give yourself is somebody come clean your house. Like if you're making a little extra money, why don't you put some of that in so that you can be more present as a parent when you need to be, and not just, the house cleaner that the kids call mom. Right. So that delegation was important. And then carrying the load was really important. Like I knew that she would have to work later nights a lot of times just because of meetings or something going on with shipping or whatever. So, I was always making sure that we were there. We always tried to make sure one of us was there with the kids in those evenings and to help with homework. The thing that I admired about her is she would go to their room every night and talk to them by their bed and pray with them. Without fail. I'm sure it wasn't every single night all the time, but she really, she was dedicated to that. And Cindy's always been really good about understanding that, I have to put way too much of my time into this. So she has always done intentional things outside of that. We always tell people we had our first family vacation 3 months into the business. We couldn't rub 2 nickels together. We had no money. We took the kids to Disney and stayed offsite at some resort, and somebody's borrowed vacation points or something. And but we did it because we knew it was important that if we were going to work, I'd seen people in the ministry, I'd quite honestly do it poorly, where their family was their church and their family were the people that just were expected to come to church, and sit on the front row. And, I've sat in the car with a pastor and him just cry and fall apart because he was neglecting his family and neglecting life and outside of church. So I saw that over and over and over again. So I think we were just really intent on not doing that and trying to maintain that balance and find ways to offset it and spend time with our kids. And so yeah, we shared those duties and we still share duties, at home. I'm sure I could do the dishes more, but no, you know what? Even now, I cook. I actually do cook most of the time. Cindy's a great cook, but she likes it when I cook. And even now, there's kind of this unwritten rule that happens, and she just automatically does the dishes after cooking, and that's kind of her rule. She's like, "You cooked, I should do the dishes." No, we share it. I jump in and do them sometimes or help, but we don't. It's not like we're not uptight and OCD about it, but we do. We share that. And I think we had to learn early on that we share this responsibility. There are parts that I carry better than her. There are parts she carries better than me. And we just try to find that balance. We don't always do it well, but
Well, it all comes down to communicating, like you said. Like you said at the very beginning, just sitting down and having these conversations and not just sweeping it under the rug or thinking it's going to fix itself, but literally sitting down and again, letting people know, okay, I'm going to take this and you can take that, and being intentional with continue. I'm sure there were so many times y'all had to have conversations when things felt like they were, the train was coming off the track, even with the delegation and even with that. So just having that open line of communication. And one of the number one questions that I get is, how do I get my husband to be supportive of my business? How do I get him on board? And I know you've had so many conversations with mompreneurs and the spouses about this, because I've seen you have them personally. So for someone who's listening, like, how does somebody, if she's starting her business or she has this idea and the husband is just not having it, like, what would you say to her to do to help him get on board?
I have two messages, and one of them references something you said earlier. You talked about how Shaw would, help with the kids, and you have to find those things. So two things that I tell guys, this is, or you were talking about mompreneurs. So husbands in this case, there are a couple of things. One, you're not ever allowed to say you're babysitting your own kids.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
They're your kids.
Mm-hmm.
There is no babysitting of your own. I don't say that to make people feel bad. Mm-hmm. And maybe there's hopefully a little conviction comes from that, but you don't.
Yeah.
This idea of the roles that our parents or that society have placed on us in a world where there's so much fluidity of who works and who is the bread keeper and all of that. And this whole idea that I'm going to stick to my roles, even though I live in a world that operates differently than that, is just wrong. And for a husband to sit and watch a mompreneur go out and do her thing, and for him to sit at home and say, I got TV to watch, or I got to play golf, or whatever those things. That's in my mind is not acceptable. But that's my very hard message toward the guys, and that turns a lot of guys off. A lot of guys have embraced it though, and seen a lot of change, and just finding that balance and saying, it's not, ignore the voice in your head that says your role is supposed to be A, B, C, D.
Right.
You have to be flexible. But I think for the mompreneurs, I've gotten this question 1,000 times. How do I get him on board? First of all, I think it starts with honest conversations about why this is important to you, why this is your dream, what you hope to do for yourself, and what you hope to do for the family through it. And it's okay if, it's okay for, I think, mompreneurs to say, I just need this because I'm going crazy in the house. Yeah. And I need to start this thing. It's okay for a mompreneur to say, the kids are going to be gone in 3 years, 4 years. I need something to invest myself into because I'm not going to have them to invest myself into anymore.
Right.
So I need to go find this thing. It's okay to say that, but I do think what happens most of the time in human relationships is she says, I think I want to start something. Huh? What do you want to start? Well, I think I'm going to sell so-and-so. I'm going to sell leather shoes.
Right.
Why you want to do that? That's stupid. You're not a shoe salesman. Or why do you need to do that? I think the other thing that is a huge misunderstanding in our culture where for hundreds of years, but especially in our American culture, this has changed a lot, where men were expected by their fathers and grandfathers in society to be the breadwinner.
Right.
It can be insulting to guys for her to say, I want to go make some money on my own, or I want to go do this. So there has to be a clear communication. I'm not doing this to take that right away from you of being a breadwinner.
Right.
I'm doing this because I need to do it. I need to do it for me. And hopefully it'll make a contribution so that we can do more.
Right.
Because I don't think there's any family in America where people aren't somehow saying, I want to do more. Andy Stanley says every socioeconomic level, when you ask them what success looks like and ask them to put numbers to it, it's always like the next level up when they break it apart.
Right.
And so I think people always want more, want to do more. And so I think a clear understanding that I'm doing this partially for me. I'm doing this partially for our family. I'm doing this, for you. And that, in some cases, I think the mompreneur wants to prove to herself and to her spouse that she can do something.
Right. Yeah.
And it's about confidence, and it's about, finding her niche and carving out space for herself. But I think the biggest problem is nobody communicates that.
Right.
I
That's
think
so
they
true.
just say, I just want to start it. I'm just going to do this thing.
Yeah.
And it even gets, if they get a little attitude, then it gets even snippier. Well, I don't care what you say. I'm going to do it anyway because this is my thing. And I go, like it just turned. It is like Martine, we jump off the peace train right into conflict immediately,
on the
almost as human
defense.
beings.
Yeah, I mean, we're just
always
on the defense, and we think people are out to get us or they want something from us. And I think that is just so key. I think she needs to figure out why for her first, right? Before she even sits down to have that conversation, to know why she wants to do this. And again, it could be as simple as I'm going crazy, I need to get out of the house. Or she does have this bigger vision, for her business, but she has to define that first before she can come to that conversation in confidence to explain it to her husband to get him on board. Because I think they also feed off of our confidence, right? Like you knew that Cindy had been successful. You knew that she made good decisions. You knew that she, had kind of that history. And so, if they've done a bunch of other things and, not maybe put in the effort or he didn't see the return on it, it's very easy for him to just think, well, she's just going to do that again,
Well, and the thing she didn't do, and this just builds off what we just talked about, she didn't just say, I need you to support me, which that's a starting point. But she was really good about saying, this is how you can support me.
Oh, that's good.
With very specific things. So, as I do this, there's some ways I really think you could support me so that I can be successful at this and set myself up and set us up for the best success. And then the other thing, it is her thing.
Right.
But when you're in marriage, you never agree to just totally have her things and his things.
Right.
Even all of her things are still a little bit of their things, and all of his things are still a little bit of their things. And so and I think that goes back to what Barbara Bush was saying. You got to meet 3/4 of the way there in anything. That's not just conflict, but that's in carrying the burden and carrying, life stuff. So, but I think really being really clear and saying, I need your support, and here's some ways you can support me is critical.
Right. And I was just thinking about when I actually had the conversation with Shaw, I would say 2 or 3 years in, and just asking him, like, there's so many things that you can bring to the table for my business. Like, he's a numbers guy. He's a strategic thinker. Like, that's not my strength. And so to ask him, like, would you be willing to kind of like be my business partner, and come on and just include him, like you said, not just meeting in the line, but trying to get him to be more involved in it. And it like he started taking my, promotional items to work with him, and he was sharing it. Like, just the invitation to be a part of it can be something that would help the husband also to get on board, for you to say, hey, you're really good at this. And I think you could really help make our business, not my business, but our business grow so that we can do this, do that, whatever.
Do you, I get this question from the guys too. Like, I don't know how to support her. I don't know what to do. And I've seen it go well, and I've seen it go not so well.
Right.
I've seen guys come in and, the thing they do, like say he's a spreadsheet guy, business guy, they come in and almost use that to take over.
Oh yeah. Or micromanage.
Which is, I've seen that happen over and over and over again. That never goes well. And then I've also seen the opposite end, where they just stand around and go, what can I do?
Right.
And I would always encourage them to say, well, just start with something you can do, like offer. And I'm still learning this at 55, is to offer, not just say, hey, let me do that, but to actually say, hey, can I help you by doing this or by doing this? So, in our business, can you maybe go out to the car, meet her there, ask her how the party went, and say, can I help you carry some of this back into the house? Just little, that's a little step. It's a very small thing that actually, for most guys that have done that, tell me it turns into a huge thing. But I wonder, though, sometimes, is it better for the mompreneur to learn to leverage her husband's strengths or his passion?
That's a good question.
Because sometimes our strength is kind of the thing we do all the time. So like if it is accounting, it's counting. But what I heard you say is Shaw got really passionate about sharing it, and sharing it with other people. And I don't know. I don't have an answer to that. But I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think, is there a difference?
I think just when they feel like they're a part of the process, and that I think anytime you can lead with a compliment, in a conversation and say, this is what I see you're really good at. But I think that's a great follow-up question. Like, just because you're good at it. I mean, I just talked about this on the podcast released today, not today. Well, not today of our the day of our recording this, but the conference that I was at, they were talking about, capable versus calling. And you can be really good and capable at something, but is that really what God's calling you to do? And sometimes if you're just doing what you're capable of and you're not passionate about it and you don't feel called, then it's life draining. And so I think it's a really fair question. I never thought about that to just even draw up some conversation and between the mompreneur and her husband. I think it's a great next question. Like, this is what I see, but is this something that you could get passionate about? And if not, then let's ask another question. Right. So it's pretty interesting.
Well, it may be like a welcome break from, if your husband is really good at, a thing and that's what he does for his work, but, he's passionate about something else. So, and that's the hobby that he does. Like we had guys that would make racks for products, because their hobby was to do woodworking or whatever. And so that's the reason another reason that came to mind is that sometimes guys, what they did could contribute, but it was their thing they were passionate about that really was able to bring some things to her, to her business. So
what brings energy and joy to them too, when you're doing something that you really enjoy doing, not just something that you're really good at. I mean, I am great at being a leader, but there are times where it's just, the passion's not there. Right. And you can feel it. You feel it draining your energy and draining your joy. So just because I'm good at that doesn't mean that that's, where I want to lay my hat, at that time. So the other thing I was going to mention about this topic is, this comes up a lot on my coaching calls, is seeing the business as a distraction to the relationship. And so one of the questions I always give back to my coaching clients is, okay, if he's frustrated about your business, when's the last time you went on a date night? When's the last time, because if he's seeing that as a distraction from time he has with you, and let's just say his love language is quality time, then I understand. If you're not making your marriage a priority, your relationship priority, then of course he's going to have a hard time supporting this other business and coming alongside you. Do you agree with that?
I absolutely agree. It's, I'm just making this up, but it's the cell phone syndrome, right?
Right.
It's the mommy. Yeah. Mommy, I did this today. It's cool. Oh, cool. It's this, it is. And that business is like the cell phone. Sometimes it's, we're married and I love you. But I'm working over here and never drawing that line and being, and that's what I talked about earlier and talk about all the time, is how good Cindy was at being intentional, because she was distracted with business a lot. It was, business was gigantic and still gigantic. And it's unbelievable what thing God birthed out of that. But that meant it was always a thing that she was having to do and having to focus on and all that. So she said, okay, I can't not be distracted over here, but I am going to be very intentional about you and our time together. And we're going to get away and we're going to do stuff. We're on the weekends, we're going to take the kids and we're going to go boating, or we're going to do this. And we put a lot of effort into that stuff because we knew, and really Cindy knew, and I was, I could see it, but didn't know how to do it. She's the one that takes all the initiative. But she's like, we got to be intentional about that. And that you're right. You can't just assume because your business is going well and everything's hunky dory that you don't still need to be focused on, the people in your life that mean the most, your kids, your spouse,
right.
family. So
thanks so much, y'all. We will catch you on the next episode. And you know that I'm believing in you always. Well, that's a wrap, friends, for this week's episode of the Mompreneur Life Remixed podcast. Thank you so much for listening and for following the show. It means so much to me. And listen, friend, sharing is caring. So if you loved this episode and thought of some fellow mompreneurs who could benefit, send them the link. Share this episode or take a screenshot and head on over to Instagram and share and tag me at Martine31Williams. We are connected on Instagram, right? It's where you will get all the fun behind the scenes of my life and business as a mompreneur. Until next time, know that I am believing in you always.